Okay, put us on speaker view. All right, so I'm excited today because we are with the staff from the providers from High Country Caregivers. I work a lot with them. I'm not going to tell you what all we do together because I'm going to let them tell you. So welcome everybody. I'm going to let the people from High Country Caregivers introduce themselves. 4 is the most we've had. So that's the logistics of that are interesting trying to manage, but they're all very well behaved. So I think we'll be okay. So Marty, I'm going to ask you to start if you don't mind. And then if y'all just go down the row and introduce yourselves and tell what your role is with High Country Caregivers.
Thank you, Denise. We're really thankful to be here today. I am Marty Wilson. I'm the program director for High Country Caregivers. We work directly with kinship caregivers, not foster families in particular. And this is Nate.
Hey, I'm Nathan Brown. I'm a kinship navigator. I am the, I guess, the new recruits contact and sort of the case manager for the agency.
I'm Jacob Willis, Executive Director for High Country Caregivers.
And I'm Pana Columbus. I'm the Director of Community Relations.
Great, thank y'all. I remember back in the day when it was just Marty. So I'm excited to see y'all have quadrupled in size. I'm excited to hear what everybody does. So okay, let's do that first. Let's talk a little bit about what each of y'all's job roles entail. And if y'all happen to get into the kinds of things that y'all see, but I think we can save that to after. So if you could just talk a little bit about what your role is there at the agency, and then we'll get more into the types of trauma that you see with the families that you work with.
Who wants to start?
Well, I'm the Executive Director for High Country Caregivers, and I've been here for going on 2.5 years now. And I do everything from grant writing to taking out the trash, and have oversight of program development.
Thank you.
Pana Columbus again, community relations. So I relate to the community. I forge community partnerships. Helping these families is all about learning about what the different agencies are doing in the region and forming this broad network of support so we could do it together.
Referral sources.
And referral sources. So when folks have families that they want to refer to our agency, they give me a call.
I am Nathan Brown. I'm the kinship navigator. I've been here for about 2 weeks, so my role is still evolving. I'll be working with new clients as an intake and assessment roles, and I'll also be, I guess, doing continuing care with and referrals through the agency.
Got it.
I'm Marty Wilson, program director. I've been here right at 2 years, and I work directly with the families with locating resources. It's probably best to say from the beginning, when we get a call, we contact this family directly. Usually within 24 to 48 hours, we are doing a home visit, and we do a full assessment of what their needs are and what their kind of strengths and weaknesses are. We walk into situations where people are doing just fine financially or environmentally, but emotionally and socially they're struggling. And then we have the opposite, where they're fine with the children in school and everything, but financially they have nothing. Their resources are limited in their homes. So each individual family varies at the time we meet them. My job has been to go in and determine what's the first need that needs to be met, and then to work down our list of needs and then monitor that family on progress and work with them on whatever the next need is. So, for example, a very first need might be that they have no legal rights to these children. So we might work with a lawyer to get them what they need to put the child in school or to get the child health care. On the other side of that, we have grandmothers and grandparents that are single, living on their own under, Medicaid and Medicare. They have 1-bedroom apartments under the HUD housing agreements. So we've had to find housing to support children. We've had to find beds and furniture, dressers, just somewhere for the children to put their stuff. And whatever we can do to get that child in a safe environment that makes everybody's life a little less stressful, then they're more likely to succeed at school and to succeed in these relationships. So kind of what we focus on is getting is the successful relationship with their family member.
Thanks, Marty. So I want to get into some logistics and a little bit about number of families you serve and things like that. But let's talk a little bit about the kinds of trauma that you see. You had me come to a meeting once. I don't think it was a support group. I think it was a meeting. And I heard maybe three, just tiny bits of maybe three different situations. And it was very evident to me the amount of trauma that the kids are coming from. So is there a general theme or something that seems to be more common? Can you talk a little bit about what some of the children have been through that are in the care of these relative caregivers?
These kids, about 80% of our kids come to us due to the opioid crisis. And generally, it's not direct physical abuse of the child, it's neglect and abandonment. So the children live in a place where drugs are prevalent and there's no care and no attention paid. And usually DSS has stepped in or is fixing to step into the situation, and the grandparents are the placement, most of the time, single grandmothers for those children. So that's about 80% of our families is a direct result of some type of drug use within the home.
Got it. Yeah, Chad Slagle said recently that the amount of cases that they have due to substance abuse has just kind of exploded in the past 5 or 6 years. So that makes sense. So any other kind of common themes besides the drug addiction that are more common?
Well, I think a lot of the trauma that happens with these families and with the children in particular is no matter what their parents are like, they love their parents or parent in many cases. And so they're uprooted from them. Many times when they're taken away, they spend the night, several nights at DSS, waiting to find out where they're going to go. And what our agency does is we support those families, those kinship caregivers, because then trauma increases exponentially when they're placed in foster care or in a children's home. And the reason the state pushes so hard for kinship caregiving is because that reduces the amount of trauma that child faces when they're placed with family members. A lot of what happens with that after the placement is that there's stigma with not having parents. It's not as bad as a stigma of not having a family, but many of those children are dropped off at school and they're dropped off by grandma and they're asked, where's your mom? Where's your dad? Many of them are singled out because when these grandmothers get these kids, they're on a fixed income of $1,000 or less a month, and they may get 3 kids. So the children don't have, before they come to our program, they don't have the same clothes. They don't have the same stuff. They don't have the same, in many cases, food. They don't have the same food that a kid in a traditional family being raised by a parent that's working full time would have. So all of those are challenges for kinship caregivers. Can you imagine being 75 years old and living in a 1-bedroom HUD apartment in an elderly housing neighborhood and then bringing you 2 grandkids at your door at 3 a.m.? That's traumatic for everyone. So our agency works within those parameters to help those children and those grandparents adjust.
It's interesting. We've actually had 2 foster care related topics in Wednesday Conversation the past month or so. One was a man who grew up in the foster care system and talking about what a struggle it was for him at school to, everybody knew he came from foster care. He either had the sense or it was reality that people thought he was bad, a bad kid because he was in foster care, and that, we forget that the children haven't actually done anything wrong. That's not why they're in foster care. And then the second one was someone who's a foster care worker who was actually, I didn't plan it that way, but the young man's foster care worker when he was young. Just talking about how difficult it is for kids in foster care to go to school and feel accepted and worthy and valuable. And he said, everybody thinks that you're stupid and don't know how to do anything. And just there's some real challenges with destigmatizing kids in the foster care system. I think I read one time that something like 98% of kids in foster care come from trauma, which I was actually surprised it wasn't higher than that, because it seems to me like being in foster care, of course, you're coming from some form of trauma. So that's helpful. Thank you for those descriptions. So thinking about ways that y'all help people build resilience, because that's not only the family caregivers, but also the children too, I'm imagining. Can you talk, Marty, you did a really good job talking about sort of a case management kind of thing, but I know that there's support groups and other things. So what are some of the ways that y'all help the families and the children to build strengths and build resilience?
Well, it really starts with that in-home assessment and plan of care, because we do an individualized in-home assessment and plan of care that identifies the problems, the interventions that need to take place, and the opportunities to impact those families, not just the children, but the grandparents. And we take that and then we build a relationship chart around that family and identify who's negative and who's positive in the life of that child. And then identifying the needs of that child. Our organization, Kinship Navigation's purpose is to help these families navigate to a place of stability. And so as they're navigating towards a place of stability, we connect the dots for them and connect them with different resources and different organizations in the community that offer different things. And Marty's been a rock star with this. She's delivered furniture. She's delivered, during COVID, she delivered a couple thousand pounds of food a month. Whatever it is to keep those families safe and healthy. And then we go beyond that. So we network with resources that are available, but as a nonprofit, what we want to do is find what that child is really good at and help provide the money and the means for them to be able to be successful. And some examples are we paid for dance classes, we paid for recreational sports fees. I'll give you one example. We had a child in our program that was born with his intestines outside his body due to his mother's drug use. And he had a withered hand, and he was really struggling in school, and he was struggling to survive, and he didn't have the food that he needed. So First Baptist Church in Boone volunteered to take them on, and they bought their groceries every month. And so he got gluten-free food that he needed. His grandmother was 70 some years old with leukemia and was an amputee. And she was raising him and his sister. He got to meet Coach Moore, who's on our board, and he wanted to play football. So he starts playing football. He graduates Watauga in 3 years and is now at community college. By just giving him the food and the nutrients he needed, and by identifying people that could supply that. Another example, we had a kid in Avery that wanted to be in ROTC in the band, and his grandmother could not afford the fees. And High Country Caregivers for 5 years of that child's life provided the instrument, provided the fees that were necessary for the uniforms, provided what he needed to do those two things. And when he graduated Avery and with honors, he's now at Virginia Tech on a full scholarship to play in the band, and he's going to go on into the military when he graduates. So those are the kind of things that we do. We identify what is that child's interest and give, and how can we impact them. And by exposing them, we take them to theater, we take them to different experiences that otherwise they wouldn't get. We're planning during this time, you don't know what your plans are going to end up being, but we're planning to take them to an ASU football and basketball and volleyball game, taking them to meet the cheerleaders, taking them to meet the football players, showing them that there is outlets and there is a place for them, and that there's opportunity out there, and that helping them find that opportunity. We're building right now a scholarship fund so that we can help kids in our program that when they graduate high school, we can give them a stipend to go on to a secondary education, whether it's community college, technical college, or university. So that in a nutshell is what our goal is. So when we get those kids when they're younger, of course, we can do a much better job of following them. We follow them all the way through until they graduate high school. They stay in our program.
This reminds me a lot of, sorry to interrupt you, this reminds me a lot, is like 22 years ago, we had something called Wraparound Care. And one of the things that was so unique about that program, there were several of us doing, so the different agencies would donate a tiny piece of us and we each carried a case. And we had access to funds where we could request things, and all we had to do was tie it to some goal in the plan, and the intervention plan. And that was unheard of. Like normally when you go to apply for money from somebody, you have to meet a certain income eligibility requirement. It can only be for rent or lights. There's all these criteria and all these requirements. It's really hard to get the things that y'all are talking about, band and sports, and people don't consider those to be critical necessities, but they are critical necessities. So I really love that y'all are able to do that for people.
You're exactly right, Denise. And what ends up happening with these kids is when they get an outlet for their grief, when they get an outlet for their trauma, when they get something that they're really good at and people brag on them for doing, it increases their self-confidence, their grade point average goes up, and we track all those things through those charts. And so our goal is to make this evidence-based within the next 2 to 3 years when we get enough long-term data. Some of these kids, by that time, we will have followed for 6 to 8 years. Our support groups are for the grandparents, and that's a place for them not only to vent, but we're also starting a program starting a curriculum called Creating a Family. And Creating a Family is a curriculum that will give them credits or units towards becoming a foster parent or getting their foster parenting license. And the reason that's important is because if they can get that, then they can get a stipend from the state so that they can use that money. Right now, our families don't receive any funding from the state of North Carolina.
That's a really good point to make, because that's my understanding. So I'll ask you, maybe you know, I've never been sure about that. When you're a qualified, trained, certified, licensed foster care provider through DSS, then you get a check for being a foster parent. But my understanding has always been if it's a kinship placement or an informal arrangement with family, that then they don't get the money from the state for caring for these kids. Am I right about that? That's
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
When they're placed there, they receive little to no money from the state. When I mean little money, I mean like $500 a year.
Right. So Creating a Family, somebody said in the chat that sounds like an amazing curriculum. And so one of y'all just recently mentioned, I think Avery County, maybe that was you. So y'all are in more than Watauga County then. How many counties do you serve?
We serve with Kinship Navigation. We serve Ashe, Watauga, Avery, Mitchell, and Yancey right now. Okay. And we have over 60 families and 130 kids.
Wow. And so you talk some about the financial support. You talk some about the referrals to resources and assistance in that way. I know from talking to Marty in the past, at least in the past, you've done support groups. Are those still going on?
They are. Yeah, yes, we have support groups, and we're starting the curriculum Creating a Family with those grandparents. And so those support groups go on the last week of every month. We have a support group in each county.
Okay.
And Watauga's happens on Monday afternoons at 4:30. And we provide a meal. We provide childcare for the kids, and whatever else that we need to help those grandmothers get there.
And so with the COVID now, are y'all, and so if you're doing childcare meals, then y'all are in person?
we've been meeting in person all summer. Now, you know, if this continues to go on the track that it's going on, we may cease meeting in person, but we met in person in August. So we don't have a plan yet for September. It's a wait and see. But meeting by Zoom is nearly impossible for those grandmothers. I mean, it's just not something that happens for them.
Yeah. Someone asked if the information about resources and supports and support groups is on the website.
It is.
Okay.
It is. And you can look us up at highcountrycaregivers.com.
When I sent out the announcement this morning, I put the website in there and just like copy of y'all's mission statement off your website. So people can go there for more information. Nate or Pana, anything else that y'all want to add about either the types of trauma that y'all see or some of the ways that y'all help build resilience?
Well, I think what Jacob's been talking about with the support groups, I think that is really a resiliency builder, is when people who are going through a particular kind of traumatic experience can be in a room on a regular basis. Well, we've been meeting outside, but meeting on a regular basis with other people who've gone through the same kind of trauma. The first thing that happens is that shame just goes away because they're understood. They know that people aren't judging them. And just having that shared experience is healing, instantly healing, because they're in it together. And then they form relationships and support systems with each other. Their children get to know each other. And when the children recognize that they are not alone in this, that there's other kids whose parents are in jail or missing in action or whatever, that's also healing. They can talk freely. It's not something they have to hide. So I think the support groups, that peer support, I mean, we're there and we help facilitate it, but just being in a room with other people who've experienced the same kind of trauma as they have instantly, both for the grandparents and the children, is a healing experience.
Builds community. I think when we talk about uniting people who experience similar trauma, I agree with you. It helps you feel not alone, helps you build your community and extend your support system. One of the things I really liked, Marty, about what you did the time I came was you identified something that was common. So we're bullying that was common to a lot of the families, and had me come and talk about, what are effective ways to handle that within the school system and those type of things. And so y'all seem to be really good at identifying when there's a common need that kind of stretches across lots of families and trying to address that in a way that's beneficial and effective. Can't tell you how many times somebody has a problem and they either pick a way to do it, either they don't know how to solve it, or they pick a way to solve it that won't solve it. And so I just really like that y'all seem to have this skill for identifying a common problem and then going to somebody who's kind of an expert in that field to help give them some support. So I liked the way that happened when I came that day. Y'all did a good job carrying on. Y'all are being distracted. Sometimes something happens and I just completely lose my train of thought. So Marty, anything else you wanted to add? I know you had stepped away a second about the types of trauma that y'all see. So one thing I want to say is we've got kids coming from trauma. Then you also alluded to, and now it's traumatic for me to be trying to take these kids in on a limited income, limited space, limited energy, limited resources. We're not even talking about the trauma that the caregivers have been through because they've got a relative who is unable to care for their own children. Those of us who've watched that play out in our families, that can be an incredibly scary, stressful, emotional experience. So we've also got caregivers under stress from taking on new responsibilities and having to watch people in their family struggle probably for quite some time. Any other thoughts, Marty, about the kinds of trauma that y'all are seeing?
Well, yes, and part of our assessment process identifies cyclical trauma versus new. So some of these families, they don't even realize that they've been traumatized because to them it's normal. and trying to work with the family on identifying what's normal versus their own trauma. It has been an interesting adventure. And at the same time, that comes in with the educational components and working individually with them sometimes to, you know, when they bring up things at support group meetings, and they mention maybe how they've disciplined a child or something, and you kind of have to have a conversation about maybe that wasn't the best way to do that, and how could we do things a different way. So it's really, again, the individualized work with each of the families. I was trying to think of, there's so many examples, but the biggest one that I found as a common thread is that none of the families believe that this is a permanent thing, and ideally it's not a permanent thing, but most of the caregivers believe that their family member is going to go to rehab and get better and take their children back. And it's hard to work with them on that level of denial and educate them on the national average is 5 years. So many times they think they're getting these children and then nobody's going to turn their grandchildren away at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they don't realize they're going to get these kids for several months. We've got at least a handful of families, if not a dozen, that the children have actually been placed back with their biological family, only to then return to grandma in the middle of the night a month or two later. So we work with them on dealing with the fact that this is kind of an ongoing process, that their child does lie to them still, and trying to build their resilience in accepting those lies and accepting that situation when they really need to focus on what's best for the youth, the youngest person, and keep them stable. It's a really slippery slope in a lot of these processes, but we've had more than a couple who's experienced their own child's suicide. So when they get that grandchild, they haven't even had a chance to grieve their own loss, much less they would fall into the role of caregiver parent to a child who's just lost a parent forever. So it's working with them on those levels and helping them realize. I think part of one of your next segment has to do with self-care and how do you keep people out of anxiety and depression when they're really being tossed into a serious storm.
Yeah, we're going to get to that next. It reminds me of, this has been years ago. I don't even know how many, 8, but we had 2 kids taken into custody, and they were up at DSS, and the teachers were worried about them, and I knew that they were, you know, kind of hanging up there in the playroom that they have. So I just went up there to say hey and see what I could do. And while I'm standing there, different people are calling me saying, I'll take the kids, I'll take the kids, I'll take the kids. And they ended up going, and everybody, I talked to Chad that day, I talked to, you know, some other people at DSS. They were trying to talk with different family members that were off the mountain, and everybody that had those conversations that day thought we were talking about 3 to 6 months. And so 8 years later, they're still in the place that they went that day. And they never were, things at their house of origin, their family of origin, never got to the point where they can go back home. Maybe they will one day, but I just remember, I think about that often, and the decisions that we were making in that room in the moment, you know, how they've lasted 8 years. And so that reminded me when you said, you know, you think sometimes this is a month, rehab's a month, 3 months, and it could be years. So that's a good point. Anything else y'all want to add before we move on to wellness, which is one of my favorite things? Okay, so because I also am going to let you talk about some volunteer stuff at the end too. So thinking about wellness, 2 things. One is I always ask people what they do to stay well. So each one of you are going to get to answer that. But lately I've also been asking, and how do you know when it's time to do those things? Because I think, to me, after having these conversations for 1.5 years, we all have the list of things that we do. The trick is how to know when it's time to do them. Some of us naturally build them into our day, and others of us have to have some catalyst to make us do those things. So that's what I'm interested in hearing. What do you do to stay well? Because what the population that y'all deal with is intense. I just imagine, nobody's ever said that to me, but I imagine it must be. So what do you do to stay well and protect your own boundaries? And how do you know when it's time to do those things? So whoever wants to start. Anna, we haven't let you start first yet. You want to start?
Sure. Well, I think for me, groups, there's a lot of value in groups. So for example, what you do today or every week, when you focus your attention on thinking about resilience, then behavior naturally follows. So I really commend you and thank you for doing this. For me, I go to Quaker meeting on Sunday morning and I go to my Buddhist meditation group on Monday night. And that is my anchor. And if I don't go, I feel it. And when I go, I get that recharge. So having the structure of a group for me is really important. And so those 2 days a week are my bedrock practice. I think your question about when do you know to use it, when do you apply the coping skill or the strategy? For me, I think I have to be disciplined about the practice preemptively. I have to kind of do the body maintenance on a regular basis so that when something traumatic happens, I can hold it in a way that's balanced and grounded. And if I wait for the trauma to do the coping skill, forget about it. I have to work preemptively.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have to throw this in every time I can. So we always say the number one factor to offset trauma is a relationship with a positive, consistent, caring adult. That can be in a group, like Donna's talking about. So just those connections help us to sometimes offset the impacts of trauma. I'm reading a thing in the chat. Yeah, so somebody said that 8 years doesn't equate to a year of permanency. And the state is continually trying to work towards permanency for these children. And that's so true that I have a lot of close relationships to the people at CPS and just their diligence in making sure that, the best thing that's done for children and that people have the support they need. So definitely want to acknowledge that I think it's all of our intentions to do the best thing for children. Jacob, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what was said there in the comment that I commend all of our DSSs that we work with because number one, they're overworked, they're underpaid, and they don't have the resources to deal with things that they need, and they do a phenomenal job of helping and loving and caring for those children, and they wouldn't be doing that job if they didn't. And so we appreciate them and the relationship that we have with them, and that comment is right. They've got 13 months to permanency. The problem is not with DSS in that. The problem sometimes arises when there's not, if there's if there's abuse and abandonment, or if there's abuse and neglect, if there's abandonment and neglect, then it's pretty easy to get permanency in a kinship placement. But if there's not, and there's only one of those, and that parent takes 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, as the old adage is, then that can drag out in court. And where our organization comes in is when DSS requests, then we will go to the lawyer that we contract with, which is Andy Brooks. And if the family is willing to do a custody agreement in civil court, then our organization will pay for that. And then that helps get that child to permanency. And it also helps stabilize that family. So I just throw that in there. But as far as self-care, we structure our organization here because of what I know that all of the people that work here have to deal with, and especially Pana, Nathan, and Marty, the stuff they see and the stuff they hear and the workload is tremendous. And so what I try to do and what we do, I feel like that hopefully helps, is that they set their own schedule, they flex their schedules, and they're able to work at their own pace. And we work more as did we complete what our goal was here, rather than are you here at 8 in the morning? Because a lot of times they're out until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So being flexible and having time and making sure that we as an organization, that I give them plenty of time off, that plenty of support in the fact of look, take some space, get some time, take some time to yourself. Don't drive if you don't have to. Do the things that help you rest physically and mentally is so important, because social work burnout is, as you know, Denise, is pretty significant, and not everyone can handle what we see and what we deal with. And then we practice what I learned when I was working in the prison system with inmates. You got to love with two hearts. You got this heart that's out here, and it believes and it hears and it actively listens and participates and sympathizes and empathizes with them. But then you have to have this other heart that's in here, as Marty said, because not every time are you being sold the correct bill of goods. And so we work on training, we work on working with other organizations and going to seminars and getting the training we need to be able to take care of ourselves, and not taking it home with us is so vitally important. Making sure too that the reason we do those assessments is because we want to make sure that we're investing donor dollars and our energy into situations that are not perpetuating trauma. So we do an in-home assessment to make sure that when we pour our energy and our heart into something, that it's a good, safe, quality environment for that child. And I think that helps us stay well. That helps us feel really good at the end of the day about what we've done for these families. And when you see people succeed and take the ball and run with it, so to speak, then it really makes you feel good about the job you did at the end of the day. And personally, for self-care, sleep, food, and before COVID, exercise was really important. And as Pana said, prayer, meditation, whatever you want to call it, having silence and singleness of mind at least once a day really makes a huge difference for me personally in trying to deal and process with, because sometimes you can detach yourself so much that you don't realize how it's affecting you and what your feelings are and what your reality is in all of that. So I encourage all three of them to rest, to take time to work at their pace, to, that we have goals, we accomplish those goals, we have deadlines, of course, but if you can do those things at home, if you can do those things, in a timely manner and do them well, then do them at your pace and at your schedule so that you've got some breathing room. Because our response time, as Marty said, when we get a referral, we're calling within the first 24 hours of that referral, and within 48 hours, we're at the home.
Wow.
So that's pressure. And I want to make sure that our people are well taken care of.
I loved a lot of stuff you said. One of it that I've never thought of before is that doing quality work is a way of taking care of yourself, because you don't have to worry about the situation that people are in. So I've never thought about that before. I really like that perspective. Nate, what can you share with us about your wellness and when to use them?
Well, I've not quite gotten into the routine here yet. Like I said, I've only been here about 3 weeks, so I'm still learning the ropes. But in my past position as a probation parole officer, I've worked as case manager in prisons and also worked as an officer in prisons. Learning to just take time for yourself, communicating with your coworkers when you're feeling stressed, so that you have, that support, internally as a group works well. Personally, though, I find outlets. I like to paint. I actually have one that I'm going to be donating to the agency for the auction, so that'll be showcased as well. But I like to draw. I journal a lot. write short stories. I'll find an activity with some friends. Like I really enjoyed axe throwing last month. That was a lot of fun. So
Axe throwing.
just finding things that to help get that stress out. And having been a caregiver for my late wife when she was dealing with cancer, those things are vitally important to by going to group meetings, to going out with your close friends, and really just letting go and learning that it's okay to take time for yourself and be so that you can heal properly, so you can then go out and help others. That's the most important part for me.
That was the first time you shared that with me, Nate. I'm sorry for your loss. The axe throwing, my 17-year-old she was a Parks and Rec camp counselor this summer, and she took 8-year-olds to the axe throwing. And she said that the axe was as big as most of them were.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never been there, there's woods behind, at least the one place where they went, that she went. And so they let the kids throw the axes, and that were as big as some of them. And so she said that was probably one of the funniest things she's ever witnessed, was those 8-year-olds trying to heave those axes towards the kids. So I agree with you that it's a good wellness practice. Marty, what would you like to add?
Gosh, that is a tough one, but because we have such an interesting team, because we all complement each other and we're opposite of each other in so many ways. It really works out good that way. But so I'm the opposite of Pana on groups. I couldn't take one more set of people at the end of the week if I had to. So I have to, but at the same time, we're the same, because I'm preemptive. I know if I've got something coming up or I have things that are getting ready to happen, I have to take that time by myself to kind of mentally prepare for it. And especially with working with some of these families, I came from a trauma-based childhood, so I've identified with a lot of the situations, and that's been good sometimes, and it's been horrific sometimes. So there's been a couple of times that I had to actually get back in the car and just cry for a little while, and then there's other times that I get back in the car and I just get so angry and so mad. So my outlet is outdoors. I've always been an outdoors person. So, and again, like Jacob, I have to have enough rest. I have to force myself to eat most of the time because I'm not food friendly. But if I can get my alone time, or if I can get outdoors, I can usually balance it all out. And interestingly, with this kind of work, it's almost like it follows the moon. We might have a week where we don't get a single referral or a call from anyone. We can call the grandmothers and they're all fine. Everybody's good. And then all of a sudden I have it yesterday where I get 3 calls in one day, 4 grandmas in crisis, and one woman needs some bunk beds. So it's kind of an all or nothing sometimes. So it's really important to identify when we do have that little bit of a break, to take that time and to get outdoors, or to meditate, or to pray, or to do whatever it is that we need to do, because if it's quiet for a couple of days, then it's going to get loud pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point, that you can't take care of other people's needs unless you've taken care of your own. 2 things that I was reminded of when I was hearing Jacob talk about taking care of your people and us taking care of ourselves. When we did the conference last spring, one of the speakers said, working with trauma and not expecting it to impact you is like swimming and not expecting to get wet. And so it's really stuck with me. And I think sometimes Marty mentioned denial. We want to live in a world where we think we're impenetrable and that none of this is going to impact us. So I think if we start from, this is going to impact us, what can I do today to minimize the impact? I feel like that's a healthier place to operate from.
Yeah.
Then y'all are, go ahead.
No, you're right. And sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
And I think too, some of it, and you can't do it with things that are serious or things that are, really troubling. But you have to have a little bit of a MASH mentality about things to be able to be a social worker, or to be somebody that's working with folks with trauma. Because if you take every little thing that happens so seriously, I've found in my own life, it just drives you crazy. But if you can see some of the some of the good spirited humor in some certain situations and can be able to then pour in positive energy into those families and those children and view it in a way that, you know, we're really making a difference here, then that seems to help too. Having people like these folks to work with that are upbeat and are positive and see the good in situations is really been awesome.
Strength-based. If anybody has any questions or comments for these folks, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I'm assuming that if someone has a referral, or anybody wants to answer this, what is your process for referrals?
They can call us. We also, if they want a referral form, we have referral forms that they can email to us or fax to us. But basically, if you call us and you give us the name and the phone number of the family, then we'll reach out, contact the family, explain to them what we do, and ask if we can come out and meet with them.
What's your phone number? No, I'm sorry. What's your phone number? I'll put it in the chat.
It's 828-832-6366. And whatever button you push, 1 through 3, will roll to one of our cell phones if we're not in the office. So you basically can get us anytime. And it's on the website too. You can fill out a form on the website, hit send, it'll go to us, so we can get referrals that way.
So somebody asked, are you doing face-to-face only? So I'm assuming if you have caregivers who, especially elderly ones who are reluctant to have them in your house, you in their house, y'all, you've said you're doing calls. But you've said, I think Jacob, that was said, internet and virtual can be difficult for grandparents, but are there some people that if they want you to see them virtually, y'all have the capacity to do that?
Absolutely. And if we, if they're not comfortable, then we can certainly do that virtually or over the phone. But our goal is at some point with them to get to that home, because it's vital for us with the funds that there's one family in particular that we've spent over $7,000 this year sending their grandchildren to a trauma-based camp because they had been sexually abused. Before we take steps to do that, we like to make sure that the home they're living in is a fit and proper place to raise a child. Because many of these kids come to us without DSS screening them. A lot of times grandma just gets these kids dropped off by the parents, and DSS nor the school is involved in any kind of way. So I guess to answer your question, yes, we'll do that, and we certainly respect people's health wishes. It's better if they Zoom with us than if we do it with a call. But a lot of these folks, if you're over 70, Zooming a meeting is a chore.
If you're over 50, it's a chore. That is a really good point that you made, Jacob, about, I think a misconception may be that anytime you've got a relative that you're taking in to care for, that DSS put them there. And that's not true. A lot of times when family if you don't know this, a lot of us do on this call, but if you're a family and you can arrange your own arrangements, like with a relative or kinship placement, DSS may not be involved in that whatsoever. And so that, what you said about they'll come to us with no DSS intervention or involvement or screening, or it's just two family members who've agreed to do this arrangement. And it's, y'all may be the first professionals even in there with them trying to assess what's going on.
That's right. And so the steps that we take from there is helping them get custody of those kids so that they can enroll them in school, take them to the doctor. We also offer family counseling through a couple of counselors to help with the trauma that the children and the grandparents are going through. And many times those grandparents, they don't necessarily have, and neither would most of us, they don't have the innate skill to deal with the trauma the children have experienced. So going to a licensed professional that can give them helpful hints and tools of how to, it's not that the kid won't do it. It's that the child sometimes can't do it because of what they've been through. And so helping those grandparents understand that, look, they're not being defiant towards you because they dislike you or won't do it. It's sometimes they can't do it and emotionally they can't process. So
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I want to give you a couple minutes to do some plugs. Y'all have mentioned multiple times about how much financial support y'all are providing to caregivers. What are some ways that people can either volunteer or types of things they can donate to? If y'all accept donations, tell me a little bit about that.
we accept any donation, whether it's in-kind donations or whether it's financial donations. Now, if it's clothes or things like that, we generally don't accept that donation because we have a couple of agreements worked out with Goodwill and with Habitat and with Rams Rack and with what's the other one, Hebron Colony, and the other one, the
Salvation Army.
here on yes. So we have plenty of that stuff, and we really don't have office space big enough to store a bunch of stuff. But we do take in-kind, like if people wanted to give gift cards to help a family, if they want to give financially to the organization, and if they want to designate what they want it to go to, we have categories of help of what we do and where you can put your money and what it'll go to. The one big need we have at Christmas time, we deliver over 100 children Christmas gifts. And when I say Christmas gifts, our board of directors raises about $20,000 to make sure that these kids get a couple of $100 worth of Christmas gifts apiece. We need volunteers to help go buy presents, to help wrap presents, to help put those in bags, to organize them by family and by county and get them delivered. We need volunteers in the future. In the next 6 to 8 months, our goal is to have a program where these kids have a mentor, somebody that can, and much in the way that Big Brother Big Sister does, for the exception of our goal is to have a activity for these kids every month, something that otherwise they wouldn't get to do. Like in September, we're going to the Alta Pass apple orchard to watch them make cider and see that process and hopefully barring COVID getting worse, do a hayride and that kind of thing. We need volunteers to not only go on those trips, but develop relationships with those kids. Because many times the grandparent doesn't have the ability to answer the question about the math problem. They don't have the ability to relate with how that child's feeling about what they're facing with their, whatever issues it is at school. They may not understand their grandkids' choice in music, or their choice in friends, or their choice in boyfriend or girlfriend, or their choice in whatever it is. So having someone that is a professional person that we can trust, that would just be there for that child and check in with them once a week and find out, how did you do in school this week? Is there stuff bothering you? What's going on with you? How's your friends? And that would show up at these events, not every month, but a couple of times out of 6 months, and just show up there and spend some time with them, especially the boys. The boys need male mentors that can pour into their life and be a good example of how to be a successful man, because frankly, a lot of these dads checked out before these kids were born. And we also need women to mentor the girls, because grandma doesn't understand what these girls in school are faced with many, many times. And sometimes they're scared of it. The grandparents are just scared of what's coming out of these kids' mouths. So that's a goal of ours. So any help, we'll take it.
Got it. I'm gonna put that out. We do a summary of these on Facebook, so I'll be sure to mention some of those things. One person said, just want to remind y'all that she works for the health department, that for families that have children under 5 years of age, WIC is still a program that's in operation and are working with families by phone. Then several thank yous. I'll copy and paste some of these comments to you. I know that someone said, I know there are awesome grandparents and great grandparents in Mitchell County that really appreciate all your efforts. So If you don't have a question for these fine folks, if you'll if you want to write a chat comment to them, I'll copy and paste that to them for all the hard work that they're doing, helping us keep our families together. So appreciate y'all's time today and all the efforts that you're making. Jacob, you want to say something else?
Yeah, we also have an event coming up September the 14th at Chatola. It'll be under the tent. And if you want to check that out, that's on our website and it's on our Facebook page.
Got it. Facebook and website. That's September 14th.
That is, and it'll start at 5:30. We got a band coming that does Motown music. We got an 8-piece band, and Chatola's providing food and drinks, and it's going to be a fun time.
Got it. All right. Well, thank
It's on
you
the
so
website.
much. I got it. Thank you for all your time and all the information. I learned stuff. I always think I know stuff, and then I do these and learn. I really didn't know as much as I thought I did, kind of like a teenager. And so I have one of those at my house. So thanks for spending time with us and all the work that you're doing. I look forward to talking to y'all again in the future. I always keep you on my radar for when I'm in situations where relatives caring for kids that could use your help. So hope y'all have a good rest of the day. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.